which is a real mouthful. But basically what it means is that it is set 1 billion years in Earth's future. And as you can imagine, everything is different. As Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So in effect, because of the technology that we're dealing with in this game, it's going to seem like a fantasy game, even though it's technically, we're talking about science. So that means that there are characters in the setting who will be wielding powers which will seem like magic spells, but it's in actuality what they're doing is they're playing around with nanotechnology. Or it will seem like there are creatures with supernatural powers, but they're actually delving into other kinds of sciences, gravitic modification, genetic manipulation, all kinds of interesting things. I find that once you start exploring the depths of where science can go, and then take it and turn the volume not up to 11, but up to like 1,011,000,011, you can get some really amazing sorts of things, and it really inspires me creatively. However, the sort of spin with Numenera is that it's a post-apocalyptic science fantasy, which means that it's not so much that we're dealing with a society that is super advanced and all of this technology is available to them. We're dealing with a society that comes after such a society. And so they find in the ruins, in the remnants of past civilizations, this incredible technology which is indistinguishable from magic. So what you find is that like in the oldest form of tabletop role-playing games, player characters will be exploring ancient ruins and finding cool stuff that makes their characters more powerful, and they're going to be fighting weird creatures to accomplish it. At least that's one way to play the game. And the difference, of course, is that they're not going down into dungeons. They might be exploring the bowels of a gigantic machine, and they're not looking for +1 swords and wands of fireball, but some weird new device or some injection that will give them some new ability, and perhaps temporarily, it will infuse their bloodstream with nanites that give them the ability to manipulate magnetism or something. The possibilities are so endless. And so that's kind of what Numenera is all about. And the other cool thing about it being post-apocalyptic, one of the things that I actually really love about the post-apocalyptic genre for role-playing is that you can have this kind of stuff available. You can put whatever you want in this setting, but the game master ultimately is the one who's in control of the flow of it. So many times I've played a traditional science fiction game, and it gets really weird really fast, because if you've got some really super advanced technology in there, the players can just go buy it, right? It's readily available to everyone. But in a post-apocalyptic future, they've got to go out and hunt it down and find it. Not unlike a regular fantasy role-playing game, rather. Not unlike settings that we're familiar with, like Gamma World, for example. So that is very attractive to me because it makes it easier to run the game. And one of the hallmarks of Numenera is that I want to make it really easy on the game master. And it seems like with a setting like this that it would be really hard to run games. So the core book of Numenera, probably the largest portion of the book, is actually going to be about running games set in the setting. The setting is called the Ninth World. And so, and the game system itself is also designed to be really easy on the game master. And in fact, on the scale of role-playing games, pretty easy, pretty simple, straightforward kind of game. Not a lot of complex detail in this game, because I want to stress imagination. I want to stress wild ideas. I want to stress, story and character. So I mentioned that it's called the ninth world. That's because a billion years from now, at least eight different societies have risen up, achieved great prominence, and then for some reason disappeared. Whether that means that they fell, or whether that means that they ascended to some other level of reality, or whatever, they are now all gone. And the people of the ninth world live in sort of an Earth that has been used and reused 9 different times by 9 different significant civilizations. So, like, I've heard some comments online when I started talking about Numenera. They said, oh, Monty, a billion years in the future, humanity is going to have evolved well past anything that we can possibly recognize. You're not thinking this through, is what essentially people are telling me. And with all due respect to those people, I think actually they're not thinking it through, because what I'm talking about here is not taking 21st century humanity and just advancing them a billion years. Now, if you actually look at the scale of things, it takes, and I'm using really rough general numbers here, about 65 to 100 million years for a species to evolve and raise to great amount of prominence. There's an estimate that it takes about 50, it's like, I can't remember right now, it's either 50 to 100 million years for a civilization to start on their home planet and, assuming even sublight speeds, colonize the entire galaxy. Well, in a billion-year span, that means there's time for that to not have just happened once, but there's time for that to have happened many times, right? So the people of the setting of Numenera, they're not so much us in a billion years. They're just happen to be the beings that live on Earth in a billion years. Is our society, the first world if that's the ninth world? I'm not gonna actually explore that in the game because it doesn't have any relevance to the people in the ninth world. But you can imagine, for example, let's say it is us. There is time in a billion years for our civilization, if you're on the optimistic side, to flourish, create this huge galactic empire, and then have that empire collapse. And then the Earth to lay fallow for a long time. And a whole nother race to evolve and come into prominence on Earth. And and maybe they're not human at all, right? Maybe they're intelligent velociraptor type things, right? And they could have this whole society, but maybe they don't care about space travel. Maybe they explore multi-dimensional travel when their civilization is 10 million years old and they get fantastic civilization, fantastic technology. And then maybe after another 10 million years, they just decide to leave Earth altogether and go into another dimension. And then there's time for the Earth to lay fallow and another civilization to evolve. And maybe this one doesn't evolve. Maybe this is some portion of that old galactic empire that decides to return to Earth. But they have completely evolved into something unrecognizable because they have been living on some other planet for the last 50 million years. And they've decided to come back to their original home world, and maybe they re-evolve back toward humanity because that's where they originally came from. And maybe the civilization after that is completely engineered by them. And when they ascend to prominence, or they ascend to maybe they become energy beings like on Star Trek, and then that next one is a completely genetically created race from them. It's that kind of thing, right? There's so much time that there's so much that could happen, and you could have this whole succession of things. And like I said, in the ninth world, we postulate that there were at least 8 different things like that. And the exciting thing, from the role-playing game point of view, is that means all these people left behind cool stuff. And a lot of it, would be sufficiently advanced that it's even still around, right? Because they've experimented with, materials that last forever, or maybe it's not materials at all, maybe it's energy. So there's all kinds of cool stuff for the adventurers to find in the Ninth World. I should be advancing this. So the artwork that I'm showing you is from artist Kirwan, and all of it is just rough concept art at this point. But you can see here what Kieran's playing around with is the idea that because we're talking about a world that's been used and reused so many times, that the landscape itself that people are living in might actually have originally been created by past races, right? So here we've got a ship or a boat, and it's sailing down a river, but the river is actually some kind of artificial causeway. Now, do the people in the Ninth World recognize that it's artificial? Probably, but they would be so used to it that they would think of things like that as being perfectly normal and natural. This is some more really delicious art from Kirwan. He's been calling this one the North. Although it's quite possible that but in a billion years the Earth's poles would have flipped. So I don't know if the North is actually going to be the cold part, but whatever. That's what he called it. This piece of art is one I really, really love. No one's actually seen this one before today. And we've been playing around with this idea. There's this part of the setting where there's all of these obelisks that are kind of just left over and float in the air, and no one in the Ninth World knows exactly what they're for, but they want to find out, they want to explore and find out what it's all about. Because certainly there would be maybe valuable stuff, but also dangerous stuff around these areas. And it's worth pointing out here that the name Numenera, in the setting, it refers to basically anything in the world that the people who live in the Ninth World know comes from the past, right? It's almost a euphemism for the supernatural, but it specifically means something that's come from the past. So to the people of the Ninth World, it's almost synonymous with magic. But what it really means is this sufficiently advanced technology. So there's good Numenera, useful Numenera, and then there's dangerous Numenera. That's another piece that I'm showing for the first time. Here you see a character which is called a nano. And they're the ones that I was talking about that actually manipulate nanotechnology that's left over in the world, which there's a lot of it. And so he's in the game, he's utilizing what's called an esotery, which is a word that is very close to esoteric, but it's like a spell. And you can see he's got some cool genetically modified mount there with him. So the characters in Numenera, there are basically three main types. There are nanos, like I mentioned. There are glaives, which are like warriors. Then there are jacks, and jacks basically are jacks of all trade. So each one of these character types is very flexible and open-ended. And what you do when you're creating a character is you essentially make three choices. You choose a type, like I just mentioned. You choose a descriptor, which would be like clever or strong-willed, something that will kind of dictate the way you go through the world, the way you do things in the game, and that will modify your abilities and your stats. And then the last thing that you choose, kind of the most interesting thing that you choose, is the focus. And focus is basically what really makes your character special. And there's a weird little conceit that I'm using in the mechanics, and that is that when you've made those three choices, you're actually creating a sentence about your character, right? So you're saying, I am a descriptor type who focus, right? And so that means, for example, you might say, I am a canny jack who crafts illusions. Or I am a strong glaive who masters weapons. So all of the focuses have names that suggest action, right? They're all verbs, right? Basically, for those of us who remember our grammar rules, it's an adjective, a noun, and a verb. And that's kind of the way the whole game is kind of based around that construction. And some of the foci get really weird. A current favorite is Howls at the Moon, which basically turns your character into a classic lycanthrope, a werewolf, or some kind of creature. Now, of course, this is explained in Numenera terms, right? You have some kind of ability, whether it's a mutation or it's nanotech or something that actually changes your physical form. But to the people of the Ninth World, it's like you howl at the moon and you turn into a werewolf. These are more character ideas that Kirwan has come up with. If you guys are familiar with the French artist Mobius, he's a really big influence in this setting, and so we're really kind of giving a lot of homage to his work. Give it kind of a unique look. And like I said, everything in the Ninth World is going to be a little different. So, of course, while the people are actually this new race which has kind of come into prominence in the world, all of the animals that we are familiar with have evolved into things that are quite different. Now, the thing is that the people of the Ninth World call themselves humans, and they might refer to a creature as a deer or a hawk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to look exactly like a 21st century deer or hawk. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the people who call themselves humans are what we would recognize as human. Because of all of this technology laying around, there are a lot of things that, it's very possible that your character could have mutant powers, have cybernetic powers, could not look at all like a human at all. And of course there will be lots of cool and great villains to fight and monsters to deal with. Because again, this setting is really wide open, and we can do a lot of things with it. All right, so I have gone on and on for 20 minutes now about Numenera, and I could do that. I could do that for another 2 hours, but I'm not going to do that to you. Instead, I just want to point out that there is a Kickstarter for Numenera going on right now. It's going pretty well. We are we are well into our stretch goals. So it's to the point where if you are a backer, even at some of the sort of medium levels, because each stretch goal kind of gets you something new, or often gets you something new, it's turning into a pretty good deal for backers. So you might want to check that out. You can also go to Numenera.com, where you'll see an awful lot, if not all of this art, except for the stuff that I pointed out that was brand new. And there will be frequent updates there. I write something called Design Diaries, where I talk about both the setting and the game. And if you guys were around following the development of like Arcana Unearthed, if you go back that far, I was by the time Arcana Unearthed came out, I don't think there was a whole lot of surprises to the people who were interested in it. I am very I like to be very forthcoming with information and material and just get it out there, but I can only get out so much every day or every week. So there will be lots and lots of updates like that. Hopefully lots of questions will be answered. By the time it comes out, you'll really know if this is something that will be of interest to you or not. So I hope you'll check that out. Or you know, there's also my regular website, montecook.com, where I talk about this as well. Although all the Numenera stuff is mirrored on both sites. So that's it. That's what I'm working on now. This is what I'm really excited about. We have a lot of really cool things planned for Numenera. And I think that's it, actually, for those slides. Yeah. So let's talk about what you guys want to talk about. We can talk about Numenera stuff. We can talk about, you know, old stuff, Talus, Malhavoc Press, 3rd edition D&D. You'll notice that I said 3rd edition D&D. No, I mean, I'll just anticipate that right now. Because of contractual agreements and legal stuff, I can't talk about 5th edition, D&D Next, whatever you want to call it. But I did work on that for about a year almost. And it looks cool to me. And if you've seen the most recent playtest update, which I think just went up this week, right?
Yep.
You know more about it than I do at this point, because I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, yeah.
How could you see this? I teach 7th grade language arts, and I'm really pushing this year and forward to using more role-playing games in the classroom. It's a conservative district.
Oh, okay.
So D&D, the mention of D&D still scares people.
Oh, okay.
Using some other games like Story Realms, a new RPG kind of storytelling game that's coming out. But I'm also interested in Numenera. Do you see this working in a junior high setting? I know you've got the, we just hit the $100,000 goal, and then you're going to get teachers and librarians.
Right.
Do you think this would? Is it going to be too sophisticated for junior high kids, or?
I think that you could. Will you be running the game?
I will be.
I think
I will start out running the games,
okay,
and then using it as models of cooperation and teaching kids to do their own GMing and things like that.
I think that if there's an adult or a precocious teen involved, that you'll be fine. And in fact, so Numenera, so like I said, it's built around this creating a sentence, right? It's very much designed to encourage imagination, encourage people to really figure out a character concept and then mold the rules to fit to that. There are also some things that I think would be very appealing in an educational setting. Like, for example, remember I said that when you create a character, there are 3 choices that you make. Each one of those choices contains in it not just not just rules material, but also story material. So, for example, when you choose a type, which there are only 3, then you get a set of backgrounds that you can choose from. And when you choose a descriptor, you get a set of reasons for why you are involved in this group to choose from. And when you choose a focus, it gives you an automatic link to one of the other player characters. Like, for example, if you have the focus commands mental abilities, you can basically, through the uses of your power, you can speak telepathically to somebody. But you choose one other person in the group, and that person, it never costs you intellect to use that. Basically, you're always in mental communication with them. There are things like that that I'm specifically putting in there to create bonds and relationships. And I think that from that point of view, like just teaching kids role-playing and everything, I think that would be very useful. I hope, actually, that this will be the kind of game that would appeal to them and would be good in that setting. I mean, like I said, I am particularly, compared to stuff that I have worked on in the last 12 14 years, this is going to be very rules light, very fast moving, much more character and story driven. Yeah, the blue shirt.
How did that change for you to move from, for those of us who grew up rolling 4 dice 6, drop 1,
right,
to construct a sentence, and that is the large part of your character? What changed in your thinking about that?
A couple of things. Now, and first of all, don't get me wrong, right? I also still play in a weekly D&D game. I'm not saying, that more complex games or anything are terrible. But I have watched as I and other people have tried to teach new people more complex games to start with, and I can see the hurdles that faces. And I've also, one of the advantages to having worked in the industry for almost 25 years now is that I've had the great good fortune of talking to and hearing from a lot of gamers over the years. And it has been a very frequent statement by people that say that at some points they get tired of the game getting bogged down in lots of rules, whether they've got a rules lawyer at their table that kind of causes problems, or the game itself moves so slowly, or they find that frustrating. And I'm not trying to say that those kind of games are bad, and I don't think that they're trying to say those games are bad necessarily, but I think sometimes we just want to break from that and focus more on the creativity and the imagination side of role-playing, and less on the numbers and the tactics and moving 3 squares kind of gaming. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm getting old is the other thing.
We all are.
Yeah, right next to him.
Kind of building on that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about any kind of lessons you learned from older style of D&D. It was my understanding with the 3rd edition of D&D that there were, I don't want to say like newbie hurdles, but from what I understood of it, you designed the system to be a bit more rewarding to an experienced player. And I don't know if that's true or not. But
there were aspects to that. It was the hope that 3rd edition was going to be approachable and usable by new people. And in fact, that's where, if 3rd edition D&D is the way it is because the rules are very comprehensive, let's say, that's actually there so that a brand new DM isn't left making a lot of judgment calls based on nothing, right? It means that, while a lot of experienced DMs can just say, you get there in 3 days, right? The guy who has no basis to make that judgment call can look up a rule in the book and say, oh, okay, it says here it's going to take you 3 days to get there, right? That kind of thing. So that, I don't even think this was your question. What was your actual question?
No, my actual question was whether you view like that kind of deepness to more experienced or perhaps more mechanically minded players be something you want to see in further RPGs and will be present on it.
So it is really important to me, and this kind of gets down into the so-called edition wars. And here's my take on that. I want people to be able to play the game that they want to play. And so if there are people who want the really technical, mechanical experience, I want them to have that option to play that. And I want to be able to play that with them, because I like that kind of gaming too. But I want people to also have the opportunity to play in a completely different way if that's what they want. And so I'm not just being political here when I'm trying to say that, I don't want to disparage anything. I honestly don't want to disparage anything. If you're playing a role-playing game and you're having fun, then you're doing it right, and you're playing the right game. And because I don't want anyone to tell me, right, that I'm playing wrong, right, that I'm having wrong fun. So I don't want anyone to tell anyone else that either. So right now, the more simple, straightforward, fast-moving kind of mechanics of Numenera is what really appeals to me. And I'm always going to work on what appeals to me, because if you don't do that, I think you end up with crap. So that's why I'm going in this direction, but it's not necessarily a rejection of anything in the past either. Yeah.
Using 3rd edition as a building block, you worked on that. Is New Numenera going to be very modular based, where you could have modules like the 8th World module, where it'll be a book completely based on 8th World and it will fit right in the world? Or let's say the humans that come back can be a module, and that will fit perfectly into the rule set of Numenera. So that way you can have people that come up with their own role-playing kind of world, like mini world.
One of the things that I'm kind of playing around with, well, first of all, so the world, the 9th world, the new world of Numenera.
I guess the ultimate question is: does it play nice with making kind of your own little, your own little city, and
the world is actually because it's a pseudo post-apocalyptic kind of thing. The world is very fractured, which means that it's really easy for you to create a whole section of it, and you're not wrong, right? Yeah. The setting won't be so detailed that there won't be lots of room for GMs to create things. In fact, rather than provide a lot of specific detail, what I want to do is rather empower people to create their own. I'm a big proponent of that whole, that old adage, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So I'm definitely taking that approach with Numenera, but I'm also considering so the rule system behind Numenera, while it's very tied to it, and right now I'm calling it the cipher system, and the cipher system could easily be used in a more traditional high fantasy campaign. It could be used in a more traditional science fiction campaign. So I'm toying around with the idea at some point of taking just the rules and publishing them as their own thing, so that people can do whatever they want and can create an entirely new campaign setting, and just use the rules that they find here if they like them. So I want to keep it as open and freeform as I can.
So, because the D20 system was a very good system, that's one of the big popularities of 3rd edition. Right. So I was wondering if you were incorporating some of that idea, where
I hope to, yeah, because I'm a firm believer in the openness of the D20 system and everything. I'd like to keep working in that model. Yeah. Okay. I think you had a question.
I was wondering, above and beyond what's already been earned by the massive support the Kickstarter's gained, has there been a thought to other supplementary material, or is it just going to be the core book and what you're done? Any idea yet, or no?
Well, so as of right now, I haven't checked in an hour or so. We've got the core book, and then a short player's guide, which isn't going to actually contain any information that's not in the core book, but it's designed. If you guys are familiar with the way I did the Talus Player's Guide, where it's sort of something that you can just hand to a player and say, this is what you need to know about the setting. It will be like that, but it will also have all the rules to create a character. So it's the kind of thing where you can just give it to your players. If you're the game master, you've got the core book, they've got the player's guide, you're good to go. So there's 2 products. With stretch goals, we've already launched 3 adventures. And and there's also if you're a Kickstarter supporter, you'll get a 4th adventure that will be exclusive only to Kickstarter backers. We are very, very close to reaching the stretch goal where there will be a bestiary. And beyond that, I'm thinking about like a technology book. But the take I want to do with that is it's not just a gear book, not just lists of equipment for your character to carry. There will be that, but I also want to explore some of the ideas even further than the core book will about just some of the crazy technological ideas that are out there, with the kinds of things that could happen with nanotechnology interdimensional physics and all kinds of interesting things that a game master could use and then incorporate into his own game. So I think that'll be really fun. Beyond that, I don't have anything firm, but if the game is successful, I would love to keep putting out more stuff.
So will the core book contain not just a list of weird Numenera items, but guidelines for creating your own stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Right. It kind of goes back to that whole teaching people to run the game idea, more than just giving them stuff, teaching them. Yeah. You got a question?
So we've been sort of talking about this all along, but how do the mechanics of Numenera tie into the theme and the setting of the game itself? Like, how does that provide play? And also, if you can ask this one after, what are your favorite things to do when you're not designing games or playing games?
Okay, so the mechanics of the game are, there are a couple of different things which I think are
Wait, my mechanics, like you said something interesting about settings, about being able to create settings, but do you have things in there that are similar to like Dresden file scene creation or like setting creation?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, the players sit down and they help make the setting together.
Oh, right. So there's a little of that, but where the player, I'm going to use a word even though it's not technically correct, empowerment comes from, is actually in a way that I think is kind of cool in that it gives people more authority over their own character. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say you're playing most role-playing games. Not all, but most role-playing games. And you come to a locked door. And your character has some skill with unlocking doors. You have however the mechanics of the game work, right? You've got a chance to open that door. And it's based on you, and it's probably based on the door. And you kind of compare those things, and you roll a die, and you see if you open it up. That mechanic traditionally works exactly the same, whether you're just trying to open up your grandma's house because she forgot her keys, again, or if it's the only door out of some evil citadel and the Dark Lord of the Sith himself is chasing you down, you have the exact same chance to open up that door. In Numenera, in the Cypher system, you have the ability to manage what I'm calling effort, which is a resource that you can basically devote to any action that you take, and you can spend effort so that if it's a mechanic, if it's an action you really want to succeed at, you can spend effort, you can spend a lot of effort, and you can have a much better chance of opening that door or climbing that wall or hitting that foe or whatever. But it's a limited resource. But the nice thing is that it means that you as a player get to decide, okay, this is really important to me. This isn't so important to me. Just like in real life, I think, right, we can decide, I'm really going to put my all into this. I'm just going to give it a try, but I'm not going to care that much about it. So that's one thing, I think, where the game system is different, and it kind of matches this more of a story-based feel. Because what that ends up being is that you end up with less of those sort of situations like we've all seen in lots of games where my character is the best archer in the whole world, right? But just because of the way the dice fell or whatever, I flubbed the roll and I missed this really easy thing, and then the guy who's never picked up a bow before stands up and he shoots and he gets a bullseye. And those kinds of things are interesting sometimes, and those kind of things can happen in Numenera, but I think that kind of thing often hurts story-based games because it hurts kind of the story that you're trying to tell, where things make sense. And so the effort mechanic, I think, helps a lot with that. We're seeing that in playtesting. There's also a mechanic where, again, to sort of encourage this character-driven, story-based gaming, And I don't think I've actually talked about this yet on the website or whatever, but through the course of gaming, your character is going to earn experience points, which is a concept that we're all pretty familiar with, right? But in Numenera, you can use experience points. You can use them to like buy new aspects for your character, but you can also use them in the course of play to do things like re-roll dice or give yourself a temporary benefit to certain things based on the story of your character. For example, you could spend a small amount of experience, and again, we'll use the locked door example, right? You can come into this you're in this citadel and you're trying to get through, and there's a lot of locked doors, and it's really screwing you up. So you spend some experience, and then as the player, you say, okay, all of the locks in this citadel are similar to each other, and they're similar to this kind of lock that I saw once when I was training to be a locksmith back in wherever you're from. And so I have this bonus on all of the locks in this citadel, right? So it's not like you're giving yourself a bonus to all lockpicking attempts. It's within a specific story context, and there's a specific story reason for it. And that's all laid out in the rules. And lastly, I'll mention this too, because again, it's how the mechanics are kind of integrated into the story as far as experience points go. And that is that game masters in Numenera are empowered to basically intrude upon the rules. That's the term that I'm using right now. Right, and in a way, this is the kind of thing that game masters have been doing since 1974. Right, they make some change that because it will make the game more interesting. Right, and you know, the kind of thing where the orcs are trying to bash their way into the room where their player characters are holed up in, and the DM decides that they get through the door finally. And he's not necessarily rolling dice or looking at DCs or anything. He just decides, okay, the orcs burst into the room, and it's always at the worst possible time for the player characters, and it makes for the most exciting encounter. Well, in Numenera, DMs are encouraged to do this kind of thing. However, the game master kind of has to pay a toll in order to do that, and that toll is in the form of experience points. So let's say we're playing, and you take a swing at the bad guy with your sword, and you miss. And I say to you, not only do you miss, but you drop your sword, and it goes skittering across the floor, right? Well, there's no mechanical reason why that's happened. I'm intruding on the rules as the game master. So I then give you an experience point. And experience points aren't like in D&D. You don't need thousands of them to do anything. One experience point is actually very valuable. I give you an experience point. And then there's a mechanic for if you really don't want that to happen, you can refuse it and pay an experience point. But whatever, right? The point is that I'm making something happen in the story that's going to make the encounter more interesting, and you're getting rewarded for it. But here's the thing that playtesters have really responded well to, and that is that every time I give you an experience point that way, you then immediately get to turn around and also reward another player with an experience point for some reason that you think is valid. Right? You came up with a really great idea. You made us all laugh 5 minutes ago with that joke. You managed to finish off that last monster, whatever, right? Whatever you decide is valid, but the players also get to reward experience points. And so that creates a really interesting table dynamic with people kind of making these exchanges. And it's also a way to make sure that nobody falls way behind, right? Because everyone's kind of watching out for everyone else. That's just some of the examples of how the mechanics are kind of feeding into the story, right? The method of play that I'm hoping to try to get across with Numenera. And the answer to the second question is, it's such a cliche, right? But I'm a big reader. I read a lot, and I love movies. And I built a nuclear reactor in my basement. No. Yeah, way in the back.
I'm really excited about Geek Seekers, and I'm wondering if you could tell us like where you might watch that.
Cool, yeah. So Geek Seekers, if you guys haven't heard about it, Geek Seekers is a web series that I'm doing with actress Jen Page, and where we are investigating the paranormal, and we really are going and investigating weird places. We have finished the first investigation, which I thought was going to actually be a 2-episode, but now that we're editing it together, it actually looks like it's going to be a 3-episode investigation. And if you're free tonight, Jen and I are doing a panel at 8 o'clock, and we're going to be showing the first episode, which is like just brand new and ready to go. We'll probably have the first 2 episodes within the next few weeks, and those will be available online.
Are they about YouTube or?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, thanks for asking about that. Something very different than what what I do as my day job, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I got 2 questions. Will
Okay.
you be telling the previous 8 races at all?
No, and there's actually a specific reason why not. It's not, I'm not just being lazy. So the point of the mood and the feel of the Ninth World is that everything that's past is just weird and mysterious. And so if I detailed all that out, it would lose a lot of that mystery. And leaving it open-ended actually empowers the GM to be able to do whatever they want, right? And make it, and not have to necessarily worry about a lot of rules or a lot of setting consistency. You know, it's interesting. Like in one of the play tests, in the first session, the player characters came to this little village, and everyone there, they just knew everyone there was sick, and they didn't know why, right? But when they got there, they found out that everyone in the town was having the same dream. And don't listen to this, you're not supposed to know. She's a playtester. Actually, this is Shauna Germain. She's going to be the editor of Numenera, so we're working closely together on that. I can't even remember why I'm telling the story, but here I am telling it. So what they've discovered is that, oh, I know why. Everyone in the town is having the exact same dream, and it isn't exactly a nightmare, but it's so weird and alien that they can't really even kind of figure out what's going on, and it's waking them up, and no one's getting any sleep, and the player characters have to figure out what's going on. And so, you know, kind of what's happening here is that there's a faulty transmission, which is supposed to be, you know, transmitted into people's subconsciouses, but it's not meant for humans, right? It's meant for someone who came before. And so you know, in the narrative of the game, all I'm doing is just saying it's just so bizarre you can't even relate to a single thing that you see or feel or hear. And so, you know, because if you think about it, I mean, think about you know, taking somebody from ancient Greece and sitting down and making them watch an episode of some reality TV show, right? They're not even going to be able to relate to what's going on, or the fact that it's a TV show, you know, right? There's nothing about that will be relatable. And so I think that that's a really useful tool for the DM to just kind of stress how weird and alien it is. And it's because there's so much past, the people of the Ninth World kind of don't get really wrapped up in trying to understand it. Instead, what they try to do is try to figure out how to use it for their own future, right? So the part of the tone and the feel of Numenera is very, despite the fact that there's so much past, it's actually looking forward, right? It's You know, lots of post-apocalyptic stuff can get to be kind of grim and dour. And you can play Numenera that way, but it's actually meant to be much more sort of positive and forward-thinking. Like, let's go find some of this weird crap from the past so that we can do cool things in the future, you know? And you had another question?
I think you pretty much answered it. I was wondering if you were going to do surrounding sources. Maybe a thing to remove this out the...
Yes. Yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to be playing around